It was very difficult at that time for African Americans to get into the United States military because there was this perception that African Americans would not do well in battle. They had to overcome the prejudice of their own countrymen and yet also perform ably on the battlefield.
Like so many units of African American descent, when they go overseas, they're not sure what they're going to do. Are they going to fight as infantry? Or are they going to be stevedores and load ships? Or are they going to be labor units and cut wood?
And so they're committed to labor duty, they're unloading ships, building latrines, those type of support services. And as you can imagine, these men have been trained and they're willing to fight, they're ready to fight, and this is stressful for them.
You must be wondering, who are the Harlem Hellfighters? What did they do? Why did they exist? And how did they impact the Black community? Well, let me educate you on the overlooked part of Black history. You see, the 369th Infantry Unit, also known as the Harlem Hellfighters, was an African American National Guard unit in World War I and World War II. This infantry unit was formed in Harlem by the Black community during World War I. They believed in an African American militia and advocated for the creation of the African American military unit. Obtaining the government's approval proved to be difficult. It took several attempts to finally build the regiment. On June 2nd, 1913, the New York State Legislature and Governor William Sulzer passed a bill authorizing an African American National Guard regiment. Even though the law now allowed the establishment of the 15th New York Colored Infantry Regiment, white America still degraded the idea and the men who were a part of the unit. These African American men were trained for combat and ready to fight for the country. However, the U.S. Army made it clear that they should do no more than just labor for the U.S. Army. This was both disrespectful and a roadblock. As a member of the U.S. Army, the expectation was for you to train, protect the country, and do good deeds in the name of the American flag. But you couldn't be Black.
Anytime that we were involved with Americans, no matter where it was at, we was always ostracized. Always pointed out or mistreated.
Activated again on May 15, 1942, the Harlem Hellfighters fought in World War II, but this time they were under the United States Army, also known as the 93rd Infantry Division. During the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Harlem Hellfighters were sent to guard the Pacific coast. Following, the unit was then sent to Hawaii to defend against more attacks. Once it was time to depart from Hawaii, many men did not want to leave because there were no racial problems.
As for the 369th, it was an anti-aircraft artillery unit in the war. Activated for duty, one battalion saw combat in the Pacific Theater. Other elements served in Hawaii and on the West Coast.
On December 12, 1943, the 369th Infantry Regiment disbanded. But when they disbanded, several groups were created. Two of the most notable groups were the 369th AAA Gun Battalion, which still had members of the Harlem Hellfighters, and the 870th Triple Automatic Gun Battalion. Both groups continued to participate in World War II. On August 12, 1945, the 369th Infantry Unit landed in Okinawa right after fighting concluded and the Japanese announced their surrender.
Throughout history, Black soldiers have had to fight simultaneously for their country and for equal status within that country. And after each of the battles, Their achievements have been ignored or belittled.
During World War II, the Harlem Hellfighters was an example of what African American soldiers had to endure. In one instance, they had to fight alongside the U.S. and protect our country from the international enemies, but on the other hand, they had to fight for their rights in their country. White America and the U.S. Army didn't respect the fact that African American soldiers participated in the war. Fighting under our flag didn't mean that they had protection from the prejudice and discrimination people had against them. After World War II, they didn't come home to a massive parade or a celebration of their effort. They did not receive the same respect for their sacrifice as white counterparts. Instead, when coming home, they were sent home using a system. Many acts of courage were made by the Harlem Hellfighters, and the work of many African American soldiers who were a part of the Harlem Hellfighters was never documented. It is truly a shame that one can fight a war against another country and a war for equality. To the black community and veterans, the lack of recognition was an outrage. Over time, after World War II, the veterans of the Harlem Hellfighters were spread out and many were never heard from again. Today, the 369th Infantry Army Regiment lives from the heritage of the Harlem Hellfighters. Even though this regiment isn't the same as how they were in World War II, they still provide help to the U.S. Army. Former President Barack Obama recognized the work of one of the Harlem Hellfighters.
The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Private Henry Johnson, United States Army. Private Henry Johnson distinguished himself by extraordinary acts of heroism at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as a member of Company C, 369th Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division, American Expeditionary Forces.
Today, the 369th is one of 9 Army National Guard support units. They provide things such as fuel, medical care, and repair parts to other units. The Harlem Hellfighters were brave, honorable, and respected men. They wanted a homegrown military unit, and they created just that. Their legacy lives on today, and their communities greatly appreciate them.
So we fought like Trojans. Ain't nobody telling you no different.